All right, I'm taking a second to record while I'm on the move because I had no other time. A little community Q&A episode. It's been a couple of months, a lot of content created in a short space of time, a lot of learning and reflections, and so I'm taking a very short break to apply some of that feedback and revamp things for the show. And what I realized was that I'm helping out community members all the time, people that I know, people around me, people whether they're founders or they're just feeling a little bit lost in life or they have certain questions, because I get a mix of philosophical and psychological and spiritual as well as the practical to help us figure out ourselves. And so I wanted to take some time to answer a few community questions, see what happens, and see maybe some of the answers are useful for some of you too. So I've got some questions on my phone and let's just jump into it. All right, so this first question: I have a number of staff members and many employers now report what feels like entitlement. For example, I feel like I say thank you to my employees, though not extensively, because it's what's on their job description. But when I give them a pay rise, very few say thank you like it's expected. How do I foster a better culture of appreciation as a business leader? So you need to understand that no employee is ever paid what they are worth. Ever. And that's not a bad thing. There's always a gap between what someone is worth to a business at dollar value and what they are paid. Always. And this is a good thing because it's necessary for it to be possible for them to be employed in the first place. So let's break this down really quickly. Let's say someone brings in or is the dollar value to a company of 100,000, okay? If they were brought in 100,000 and they were paid 100,000, there would be no margin that the business could use to exist, to employ them or anyone else in the first place. There's a gap that's taken as an employer to make the business function. People that don't bring in any money, maybe they're in a job function that doesn't bring in any money, need to be paid. The people who run the business, maybe they're doing other things, they need to be paid. There's expenses to a business. You want profit so that the business can grow, and then you have to pay tax on that profit, okay? So there needs to be a margin, and that margin is the gap. What's important to understand is that that gap needs to be filled by other non-monetary things. The challenge comes when the gap isn't respected. Within this gap, there are things that an employee needs to receive for it to be worth taking that hit, for it to be worth that gap. And generally, that gap is filled by 3 or so things. First of all is security. I caught up with a friend the other day, and she was telling me that she did something that, in my opinion, a lot of people don't do. She actually sat down consciously and asked herself, what are her goals? Now, for her, it was to be a mother. Earlier in her career, she was a freelancer, but sitting down and being honest about that made her question whether being a freelancer was right for her. What she really wanted was good maternity leave and the right benefits and the job security that came with having a normal job. Most people who are employed can rely on that security, and knowing that a certain amount of money is going to come in every month is part of this gap. That is one of the things that we sign up for if we choose to have a quote unquote normal 9-to-5 job. And so it's the employer's responsibility to respect that. The second thing is vision. You see, in an organization, if you don't set the vision, someone else will set it for you. And this isn't just in companies, this is in all kinds of organizations, including countries. There needs to be a vision that people can get involved in. You as the employer, your job is to give people a purposeful vision that is worth them actually dedicating themselves to. The way I like to describe this is to understand that in life, all resources can be broken down into 3 things, and they exist on a scale. This scale is from the most finite to the most infinite. The most infinite is money. We can always make more of it. Yes, we might only have so much right now, but we can always make more money. The other end of that scale is time. It is the most finite resource we will ever have. Once it's spent, we're never getting it back. In the middle is energy, the energy that we expend to go through the world. And for now, we just need to focus on those 2 at either end. You see, when you pay someone a salary, what you're asking them to do is exchange their most finite resource of time for their most infinite resource of money. And it's money that isn't even the value, the dollar value that they might be worth or might be bringing in because of that gap. So there needs to be a vision that's much bigger than them, that energizes them, that they couldn't work towards or massively impact or change on their own. They need to be part of this journey with you if they care about that vision, and they have received that vision from you, so that there's a sense of purposefulness within life. So they're receiving a sense of purposefulness by contributing to your vision, which means you have to set it and communicate it. And that point about trading time for money is also where point number 3 comes into place, which is appreciation. Just because something is on their job description, to me anyway, almost doesn't matter, because again, the ask is way bigger than anything that they're getting on paper. That wasn't on my job description is never something you want to hear from an employee. You want to have someone actively going and creating and taking charge of their own accord. But why would they do that if they don't feel appreciated or valued? So I live in the UK right now, and in the UK, appreciation is sometimes shown in a very cold way. Sometimes we don't say it. Sometimes we don't give it very actively, or it's small, or it's implied. And when you kind of combine that with the whole "is it on my job description" thing, you get this point of like, most people don't feel appreciated. Most people spend, unfortunately, their whole lives never truly feeling listened to. So the response to that is, well, if you understand the ask and you understand that there's a gap, one of the ways of filling that gap, one of the things people want, is to feel appreciated. So your responsibility, not just job, but responsibility as an employer, is to go out of your way to appreciate them more deeply. And that doesn't have to be financial if you physically can't afford it, although that is nice, but the way it's delivered is really, really important. A pay rise or a bonus or whatever, if you do it in a really cold way, or people feel like you're doing it just to kind of like win them over, like people suss these things out. So the response needs to be regular acts of gratitude and appreciation, regular thanking, regular kindness shown, regular acknowledgement of skill or success or achievement. And when you combine that with a strong vision and readily and happily understanding that by doing it in this way and giving them security, it's okay for them to have that gap, now the energy starts to shift. All of this to say that your job, your goal is to build a culture of trust, a high trust cultural environment within your organization, one where kindness and appreciation are given freely, not because they need to. When you can understand that gap and that that's what's helping bridge that natural gap, then you get more give and take. Generally speaking, we get what we give. We receive from the world what we give to the world. So if we're not feeling appreciated or getting appreciation, even if we think we're trying to appreciate others, something there is missing. All right, next question. How do I deal with conflict in the workplace? What does good conflict resolution look like, especially when someone is treating me a certain way? So maybe someone's being, passive aggressive or whatever, because this is Britain. And when you're in a big corporate environment, especially, this can get really bad because the structure is much bigger than you or a manager, and there's HR and there's conflict resolution. So let me tell you a little story. I was on vacation a few months ago with some friends, and one friend was kind of pissing another friend off a little bit, and that other friend was talking to me about it, and they were like, oh, this is annoying me. And I kind of said, do you think he's doing this to you consciously? And that word conscious seems to wake my friend up a little bit and go, oh, this actually changes the game. If someone is treating you a certain way, they're probably doing it because it makes them feel good, and they're in a pattern or a habit of doing that without realizing it. Many cultures and faiths and belief systems for millennia have believed and described that we're all essentially energetic beings, and no matter what your background, we can all understand that we all have an energy. We all know what it's like to walk into a room where someone is really angry or really down, maybe someone's just had a fight or whatever, and you can kind of feel it, like the air is kind of heavy. What that means is we're constantly giving and receiving energy. But what happens if we don't receive the energy that we want to receive? Well, often we'll take it, and we take it unconsciously. when we lash out at someone or we get into a fight to try to win the fight. That's us taking little bits of energy. You did this to me. That's us taking little bits of energy. Us being passive aggressive or having like little power games or power dramas, this is us taking energy. We all want to take some energy. If, like with my friends, you care about each other, their answer is to make it conscious and go, well, look, hey, you did this thing to me, and address it actively. And as soon as I use that word, conscious, to my friend, he almost immediately admitted to me that that changed the entire way he was framing the situation, because he understood, actually, this person that I love doesn't mean to do this to me. They're in some kind of unconscious pattern. Now, that doesn't make it an excuse, but at the very least, you know that there is no malice. If there is malice, if there is ill intention, that is what changes the game, and therefore changes how you must respond. So, conflict in the workplace. Well, if there's conflict because someone is treating you a certain way, as maybe passive-aggressively, or making you feel a certain type of way, you must assess if that person is doing it intentionally with malice, or if they are in some kind of unconscious pattern. If they're just following some kind of like unconscious programming, then they probably don't mean it. Then the question you must ask yourself is, do I want to let this take over? What do I want my response to be to someone who doesn't mean to be hurting me? They're just doing things unconsciously. They're following a pattern. If you were called out for following a pattern or falling into a habit that you actually didn't like, wouldn't you want someone to call you out? Wouldn't you want someone to say, hey, I don't know if you meant to do this, but here's exactly what you're doing to me and how it made me feel? And if you don't feel confident doing that on your own and you work in a corporate structure, maybe you can find some help from someone else in the organization to have that conversation. But it doesn't need to escalate into some big thing to have to manage. It doesn't even need to be labeled as conflict in the first place if the conflict is happening within. If that is an interpretation that this person is treating me a certain type of way, when you can acknowledge there's no malice, then actually them treating you that way isn't conflict until you label it. The conflict is within. The conflict is, oh, I don't like how this makes me feel. Oh, does this person mean this, that, the other? And it spirals into a narrative that it doesn't need to be, not yet. If you find out there's malice, that's different. If you find out someone is treating you a certain way on purpose, then, it is your responsibility to safeguard your energy by reporting it on and getting the help you need within the organization, escalating it, or whatever. But if you can find out, however, and wherever in life, it doesn't have to just be in organizations, if you can find out that there's no malice involved, then you have the freedom to address it more lightly, to not take it personally, to take it a little bit less seriously, and therefore to treat them the way you would want to be treated if you were falling into an unconscious pattern. If they're not doing it consciously, there probably isn't malice, and if there's no malice, how do you want to address it? That's the question you get the freedom to ask. Okay, next question before my hands freeze off. Doing this outside was a real mess. Okay, right now it feels like I'm just surviving, going day to day. I want to start creating. Okay, I really like that. What do I do? Am I getting in my own way? Okay, the short answer is yeah, probably. If you can acknowledge that you might be, the answer is probably yeah. And while there should be no blame placed, it is therefore your responsibility to get out of your own way if you want the results of getting out of your own way. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we get those results? The language in this question is really important because it describes the difference between what I call survival mode and creation mode. In many ancient cultures and spiritual practices, wisdom, traditions, there's a difference between surviving and creating. So in Hindu and yogic practices, we have what we call chakras or energy centers. And within our body, we have 7 of them. We have our lower 3, which are to do with lust, are to do with fear, sadness, anger, and to do with essentially ego. We have these 3 lower energy centers. And then you kind of cross into what I would call creation mode, your creation energy centers further up, your heart center and above. And as soon as you get to the heart center and above, you're in creation mode. I like to also layer on top ancient Chinese teachings that are used in Qigong and Tai Chi to this day, where we have 3 different energy centers. Again, we have our lower, middle, and upper Danxian energy center. And on one of my early podcast episodes, the guest, Gavin, actually discussed with me something he calls the line, which is when you cross from survival into creation, from needing to hide and being in fear and things like that, to creating and being in your most creative self and making, creating, doing, feeling in flow, feeling more alive, feeling more awake and more aware. What I realized is when you combine these different things, what you're essentially getting is a journey where you're in survival mode and then you cross the line to your upper energy centers, in other words, into creation. The reason we need to break this down is because when we understand what is within survival mode and what is within creation mode, we can understand what to do about it. When you're in survival mode, those 3 kind of lower, they're not lower in a bad way, but lower in the sense that they're physically said to be lower in your body, energy centers, they deal with essentially survival emotions. Sadness, depression, low mood, fear, and anger, and ego. These things are all survival emotions. So if someone is in survival mode and they feel like they're just surviving, the likelihood is that that means that they're in one of these survival emotions more powerfully. And if you want to get into creation mode, you therefore need to be acting from the heart, acting from your truth, which is that kind of this throat energy center where you're creating and speaking your truth. You need to be up here in flow, in creation from the brain, from the mind, or connection to something higher or better or bigger than you're just yourself. If someone wants to transition from survival mode to creation mode, they need to understand why they feel like they're surviving in the first place. If you are stuck in fear or ego or anger or sadness, you must uncover why. Otherwise, you're stuck below the line, below this line that you must cross to get into creation. And once you're in creation, that's where your best self lies, really. That's where the you that can bring out all the beautifulness that is you lies to exist and bring things out into this world. It's where your best work lies. It's where the most impact you can create lies. It's where the version of you that attracts everything that you want also lies. So if your goal is to have a great big family one day, but you haven't attracted the partner you're going to do that with, your ability to do that and the energy that you need to have to find and attract that partner exists in that creation mode. The you that is going to attract all the money that you want in life exists in creation mode. And if you're stuck in fear and survival, don't get me wrong, some people make a decent amount of money living their entire lives in fear. Some people manage to find their partner living in sadness, but generally speaking, you're held back. Those relationships where that money isn't very good, and it's much harder to do, so you're fighting much more of an uphill battle. If only you could transform to attract those things more easily. Well, the answer, so that you can do that, lies in getting out of survival. And to get out of a trap, you must acknowledge that you're in a trap. To get out of a hole, you must understand that you're in a hole that you need to climb your way out of. What survival emotion are you living in right now? And then you can start to put into place practices so that you can do something about it. That will be your next step. I do a lot of work in and around entrepreneurship. This next question is something a lot of people in that space will feel. So this comes from that. A perpetual challenge in the networks I'm in is imposter syndrome. A lot of it feeds back from the VC narrative, not everyone, that you must be this, must do that, and sometimes this feedback is actually even conflicting. Founders then often don't know which way to go and feel like they're not fitting into this ideal, mostly toxic, unrealistic narrative. Okay, so there's a couple of different things going on here that I want to break down one at a time. The first one is imposter syndrome itself. Those words, imposter syndrome, and what that actually means, what that reveals if you feel it. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Who are you? Do you know? Do you know really who you are? If you do, you would know if you're an imposter or not. If you're playing a role and that role isn't really you, is there anything to be an imposter from? If you're fully confident in who you are. And this begs the question, who are you? I have a number of rules for my life, and rule 12 is we are our actions. So act like the person you want to be, and you might just realize you've become them. In other words, who are you? Well, you are your actions. And when you act in a certain way enough to build up a pool of evidence for yourself that you are that person, suddenly the game changes. I realized the other day that everything that isn't a fact is an opinion. By definition, everything that isn't a fact is an opinion. And if you've built up a pool of evidence that can become your facts, what does it matter someone else's opinion? Something else that isn't one of those facts is just an opinion. If you had this pool of evidence that you were who you believed you were, there would be nothing to contradict, and therefore no reason to feel like an imposter. Other people can come in with their opinions, but you'd go, so what? I know who I am, because here's all this evidence that I'm that person. When someone else gives you their opinion or tells you what they think you should do, you now have the freedom to actually ask yourself, is that right? I'm not sure. I'm so confident in who I am, there's nothing to feel like an imposter about. So actually, I don't know if I agree with that. Or maybe I do, and I can take it as constructive feedback. You become the owner of what you choose to accept from others and from yourself, and what you choose not to accept and to allow out, to stay away, because you know it's not right for you. Now, if you're ready to really have your mind blown, there's a perspective I love to outline for people because I love their response. That at any one time, there are 3 versions of you that exist, all at the same time. And those 3 versions of you are who you think you are, who others think you are, and who you think others think you are. Now, why this is important is because when you have that awareness, you can understand that there is no one you, and there is therefore no one fact about you. So in other words, you get to decide who you are. If you choose to adopt the persona of an imposter because someone who doesn't really know you has thrown an opinion about you at you, then you have chosen to pick that up and say, yes, this is me. But who they think you are is not who you have to think you are. So who do you want to think you are? And whoever that is, you have to build up the evidence that you are that person. That becomes who you are. A final little note on this point is that when you're on this journey, imposter syndrome is a dangerous label because it's just that, it's a label. When it's a syndrome, in air quotes, it can evolve from, in your mind, from something that you feel to something that you have to something that you are. And it can happen very quickly. So instead of just feeling a bit like, oh, do I like how this made me feel? It very quickly evolves into, in my being, this is who I am. And that's when it gets really dangerous because now you've let someone else's opinion, who, like we just said, didn't really know you and isn't necessarily who you really are, become who you are. And that is a choice you get to make. That's a choice I'd recommend you don't make, or you at least stop, now that you have the awareness. So that's on imposter syndrome. Now there's a second part of this question, which is around entrepreneurs and VC. And essentially, it's important to understand that other people don't know what's right for you. VCs have a goal, and their goal is to make money in a very specific way by having you, a founder who wants to build your business, if that's you, and then make a lot of money by getting many, many multiples, regardless of if you're actually a healthy business or if you're doing what's right for you or you're doing what's right for your customer or you're doing what's right for your team. Their business model is to get you to grow, then sell that off. If they ever tell you you're doing the wrong thing or they give you this advice, it's because they know they wouldn't invest in you because they know you wouldn't fit what you need to fit into to be right for them. And so the question you need to ask yourself is that a game I want to play? If yes, then keep having them and you will start to build a picture of what is actually right for how to build in a way that VCs want. If you really want to build a VC backable business, you will start to notice the patterns that lead to success. A number of my episodes on the Lost in Searching podcast have actually gone through this with founders who have raised money or exited or things like this. There are patterns of success. A certain way you need to show up or look at the business, a certain work ethic you need to have. But often, if VCs like you, it's because you can scale ridiculously fast and sell, and that means that they might overwrite your decisions. If you think something isn't right for you or your customer, they might not care. And in a way, can you blame them? That's the game you're getting into. If you don't get that that's the game you're getting into, that's on you. So don't let that imposter syndrome affect whether or not VC is right for you. Instead, I recommend treating these as two separate things and understanding that if you know who you are, you can use that to ask yourself, is this model really right for me? Do I want to play the VC game? And if so, yes, then just learn from constructive feedback what's right and what's wrong. Because there are so many of them, different people will have a different thesis about what they're looking for to an extent. They will always want you to build and grow a business at multiple times the valuation of whatever it was when they put their money in, so that they can get a multiple time return when you sell it. That will always remain true, but the details in between, the kind of character they look for, how they treat you, those things are different. I'd say attract the right ones by showing up in the right way. If you just do whatever any VC tells you, you're letting them walk all over you. If you centered that understanding of who you really are, that evidence, and then you go and decide what's really right for you in your business, and you definitely do want VC money, then you can attract the right VCs to you. If you instead adopt the mindset of, oh, please invest in me, you're now someone who's easy to take advantage of. If you have that imposter syndrome mindset, then it's even easier to take advantage of. If you reverse engineer that, understand, is this really the right game for me? And only when you're fully sure that it is, you then start from a place of, these are my principles, this is who I really am, this is this bulk of evidence that I have. No one can tell you otherwise, and you can only work, only talk to, only entertain the VCs that are right for you. When you have that, you're also more likely to be successful. So if they pass you up because you don't quite fit into whatever vague notion of who they think you should be, well, guess what? They lose out, and that's on them. All right, next question. Short and sweet, but this one seems really heavy. Okay, how do you position yourself in a way that displays all your skills and competencies in a way that creates trust? Okay, this is actually a really, really loaded question. Let me break this down into two different things. And the first one is all of your skills and competencies. This is a really key word because I'm not sure it's possible to display all your skills and competencies. And I'm not just being pedantic on the language, maybe it's just the way it was written or whatever. I actually think this is really important. This reveals the way we think about it, right? I am the whole package, but I don't know how to communicate the whole package. Well, guess what? You probably don't need to. Human beings can only take in so much information about a stranger. What we actually need is one clear, concise hook. I'm actually at a point at the time of recording where I'm trying to figure out how to communicate that. There's so much more that I could be showing people that I know I can give people when they work with me more deeply or whatever. But guess what? People can't take in that much information about a stranger. So you need to decide just what the most relevant, simple, clear, concise hook is that hooks into just the right skills and competencies that lets someone give you a chance to prove yourself. And once you're proving yourself, they will then see all the other skills and competencies that naturally come. But to try to communicate all of them, what you're essentially doing is trying to tell someone everything about who you think you are. And one of my rules for life is show, don't tell. The fastest way to build trust with someone, talking to the second point of the question about trust, is to just show it. And the only way to show it is to go out of your way without being asked to create, to prove, and to create value without needing to be asked. If you hook people in with just the right things, use that hook to show off just the right competencies in a way that creates enormous value, you've now built trust and shown someone enough of your skills and competencies to give you the space and the opportunity to show the rest of them. People don't need a bucket list of all the things that you are. If they did, every single CV would be enough. But a lot of people put a lot of things on their CV that aren't either true or they think are true that they haven't proven, that get ignored by employers, and they get ignored for a reason because you're just telling. Show, don't tell. And do it in a way that creates immense value first. One recommendation a really good entrepreneur friend of mine once gave me is make a list, like a spreadsheet, of like 50 to 100 people you know that are relevant in your network, even if it's only loosely relevant, and find a way of creating some value for all of them. Every single one. If it's just an introduction, hey, I just noticed, you see me into this thing. I know this other person. Let me just intro you quickly. Or maybe you create a thing, or you make a resource of some kind, or you do some research or work for them for free. Whatever it is, do that for 50 to 100 people, and it's going to be pretty hard not to have some kind of positive response from at least some of them. You build some trust in a way that creates value because they know you can create value for them. You're not because you're being asked to, just because you believe you should. And in doing so, you've done it in a way that showed some skills, showed some competencies. As long as it's the right ones that you feel are the ones you want to be displaying most, you're in a pretty good steading. Final thing is, as you do this, and it speaks to that example of give value to, a bunch of people for free thing I just said, is if in doing what you're doing, you build relationships. Okay, so the key here is relationship building, real person to person, getting to know the other person, asking them about them, finding out what they value and giving them the value that they want. So yes, you're giving value, but you're not just giving any value. You're giving value that that person wants, needs, cares about. Now you're showing them you actually care about them as an individual, as well as this thing that you're showing the skill and competency in. So as well as giving value, just the right competencies and skills with the right hook, you also want to be building a relationship, a really deep, meaningful one, as much as possible anyway, with them as an individual. I hope that helps. Final little cheeky short one. Any secret sauce for writing cold emails and LinkedIn notes? The short answer is don't. Create value as much as possible. Put it out there into the ether to your relevant, niche target audience. Make it in a way that speaks directly to them and the value that they want, and make it easy for them to get in touch if they want more information. The best lead is a warm lead, and if someone else can't introduce you to that person, they have to become warm by getting to know you without you needing to try to force getting to know you on them. So on LinkedIn, for example, a lot of people put out lots of free value and say, hey, if you want even more of it, come talk to me. And there are lots of ways to do that. I'm not the right person to go into lots of depth right this second about it, but try not to just reach out to loads of people. If you do, or if it's part of your strategy, in other words, I wouldn't recommend reaching out cold your whole strategy, but if it is part of your strategy, then you don't want to sell straight away. A lot of people, they go straight in for the kill. If you walked up to a total stranger and said, hey, do you want to go on a date? You didn't even say your name, you didn't ask anything, no pickup line, no nothing. How would they feel? How would you feel? You might feel really flattered immediately, but you probably wouldn't say yes, because man, would that be weird. You have no idea who this is. They could be a serial killer for all you know. Hopefully not, but you get my point. And so your job is to get to know them. Build that meaningful relationship. Ask them some questions. Say, hey, I see you're interested in this thing. Hey, I see you're in this industry. I give this thing out for free. Here you go. I'm getting to know people in this industry right now. I'd love to know this thing about you. I'm running this free event or masterclass for people in your industry. Here's the link to it. You don't go straight in for the kill right away. The secret sauce is to not just send one message. It's to build a relationship over time. It takes more time. But if you expect sending 1,000 cold outreach messages, no matter how long or short or detailed or well thought out, copy and pasting the same message to 1,000 people, if you expect the hit rate to be even 1%, you're good luck, is all I'll say. But if someone actually got to know you, gave you value you actually wanted, how would you feel? The lead might not close, but they might recommend you to someone else, or at the very least be more supportive on future LinkedIn posts. You never know. Take your time and try to do things that turn them from cold leads into warm leads that reach out to you instead of having to reach out to them. Super simple, but it all starts within here. Okay, so that's all the questions I had for now, and this took a lot longer than I thought, so I'm probably going to cut a bunch of stuff out. But I do want to say, for those that have watched this whole thing, a big thank you. Thank you to you for being a part of this, for watching this video, for giving me feedback, for being a part of all this stuff. I'm on a real journey of exploration right now. I know I'm good at giving some value like this, but this whole video thing's a little bit funky to me. So thank you for your questions. Thank you for engaging. I hope you found this useful. Stay tuned for more. Not too much more of me talking to a camera in a whole episode like this. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. But a lot more epic guests on Lost in Searching coming up and a lot more. So I will see you around very soon. Take care.